Mr Speaker, when the Prime Minister took office 9 months ago, the NHS waiting list had 7.2 million people on it. What's the number today?
Well, Mr Speaker, the reason that the NHS waiting lists are higher today than they were then, after actually being stable for the first few months as we put in place new initiatives, is very simple. And that's because the NHS has been disrupted by industrial action, Mr Speaker. Now, we've put very clear plans in place to bring down waiting lists in urgent and emergency care, in primary care, in ambulances and outpatients and electives. Those plans were working and will continue to work, but we do need to end the industrial action. So I'd ask the honourable gentleman, if he does care about bringing the waiting list down, does he agree with me that consultants and junior doctors should accept the pay deal that the government offered?
Mr Speaker,
The Prime Minister likes to get away early. The more that you stop me getting on with the questions, the more I'm going to keep him here. So it's up to you how long you want the Prime Minister. Keir Starmer.
Mr Speaker, I'm sure the whole House is pleased that he's graced us with his presence today. But we don't get any more answers when he's here than when he's not. He knows the answer. 7 million people currently on the waiting list. Prime Minister, that's the highest it's ever been. It means that since he stepped foot into Downing Street, 260,000 people have been waiting in daily agony for things like hip and knee replacements, while he boasts. Has he figured out why, after 9 months, dozens of gimmicks, umpteen broken promises, his government is failing more patients than ever before?
Mr Speaker, again, I don't think we heard an answer to the question, right?
And also, I don't want you holding up proceedings, Prime Minister.
It's very simple. If the honourable gentleman actually looked at what was happening earlier this year, what we have seen actually is that our plans were beginning to work. Ambulance and waiting times down from an hour and a half over Christmas to around half an hour. Virtually eliminating the number of people waiting 1.5 years for treatment, making huge progress on GP access. Now, all those things, all those plans we put in place, all the funding, all the extra ambulances, the extra discharge, all starting to make a difference, all held up by one very simple fact: industrial action in the NHS. Now, again, I'll give him a second chance. If he really wants to get people the health care that they want, will he agree with me that those doctors should accept the recommendations of the independent pay review body?
It will be a bad time to get thrown out. It's 6 weeks, I think, long and hard. Can I just say to the Prime Minister, it's opposition questions, it's Prime Minister's questions. Keir Starmer.
Mr Speaker, I think with his time away, he's slightly forgotten how this works. And he talks about his plans. He talks about his plans, his NHS staffing plan. He doesn't need to lecture me.
Order. It might be the last one before recess, but I'd just say to somebody, if they really want to take and go early, it will be very tempting to ensure that we do it. But think long and hard before you do. Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. He talks about his plans. He doesn't need to lecture me on that. On the NHS staffing plan, he nicked it from Labour. Yes. It's the same old story. They mess up the NHS and look to Labour to fix it. Come the election, the country will be doing the same. The difference is that, unlike us, he hasn't said how he'd pay for his workforce plan. Now's his chance. Where's the money coming from?
Mr Speaker, not only is the NHS long-term workforce plan fully funded, it was welcomed by not one, not two, but by 43 different NHS stakeholders, Mr Speaker. But no, he talks about our plans and are they making a difference? Well, let's just look in urgent and emergency care. Our plans mean that we'll put 800 more ambulances on the road, 5,000 more beds, faster discharge, more community care. That's why the Royal College of Emergency Medicine described it as significant and that it will undoubtedly improve conditions. But that's why, Mr Speaker, what have we seen? A&E waiting times in England, the best in 2 years, Mr Speaker. While Mr Speaker, and they won't like this, while the NHS has the worst waiting times in the country in Wales, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, when he said the workforce plan was fully costed, I've never seen the Chancellor more bewildered. It's less than a year since his party crashed the economy with their unfunded spending commitments, and he hasn't learnt a thing. So let me ask it another way. Is his uncosted spending coming from more tax rises, more cuts, or is it just the latest promise to fall from the Tories' magic money tree?
Mr Speaker, as I and the Chancellor set out, the plan is fully funded. He'll see that at the autumn statement. But I am pleased. He's now interested in fiscal responsibility, because that is very welcome, Mr Speaker. Because there's an opportunity for us to make sure that this is true conviction. We've just had, Mr Speaker, in the last week, we've had the recommendations of independent pay review bodies, including for the NHS. Now, I believe the right thing to do was to accept those independent recommendations, but that involves taking difficult and responsible decisions to deliver those pay rises without fueling borrowing, inflation, taxes and debt. But on this crucial issue, Mr Speaker, while his MPs are back on the picket lines, yet again on this issue, he simply refuses to take a position. It's the same old story. He should stop taking inspiration from his friends outside and unglue himself from the fence.
Who wants to lead the exit? Keir Starmer.
Mr Speaker, in that burst of nonsense, what you didn't hear was a single word about how he's going to be paying for it. Labour's NHS workforce plan is fully funded by scrapping the non-dom status that he so adores. You know the one, that non-dom...
Order. I think one or two of you have asked to catch my eye. You're not going the right way. Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Labour's workforce plan is fully funded by scrapping the non-dom status that he so adores. You know the one, the non-dom tax thing, as he calls it, that allows some of the wealthiest people in the country to avoid paying tax here. Is that loophole so important to him that he'd rather have billions in unfunded promises than simply making billionaires pay what they owe?
Mr Speaker, the same policy that has paid, I think, for 5 different things at this point. I think, Mr Speaker, everybody knows that I'm a fan of doing maths to 18, but the honourable gentleman makes a very strong case for doing maths all the way to 61, quite frankly. When it comes, Mr Speaker, but when it comes to the substance of the plan, because it's important we address this, right? I am aware, actually, and I will say this. He did set out some proposals to train more staff. The problem is, Mr Speaker, that's all he did. Our plan is much more comprehensive and it's much more impactful, because not only will we train more staff, Mr Speaker, well, no, this is important substance, because I acknowledge the party opposite did set out some plans to train more, but that's not enough. You also have to set out plans, as we did, to retain more NHS staff. And you also crucially have to set out plans to how you reform the NHS so that you can have a more productive NHS. And that is the difference between us, Mr Speaker. He is only ever focused on the superficial headline. We're getting on and doing the actual reform.
Mr Speaker, if he's so good at maths, he'd know I'm 60, not 61. I don't know whether the Prime Minister's found time to visit Hillingdon Hospital during the recent by-elections, where the wards have had to close, staff are working in appalling conditions and patient safety is at risk. And that's simply a snapshot of the wider problem. This week, the National Audit Office set out in detail what everyone already knows. The government's hospital programme has, shall we say, some gaps in it. So can the Prime Minister confirm that, apart from the fact that there aren't 40 of them, and the fact that most of them aren't new, and that many of them aren't even hospitals, everything's going fine with the 40 new hospitals.
Mr Speaker, not only are we going to deliver on our manifesto commitment to build 40 new hospitals across the country by 2030, we're not just stopping there, Mr Speaker, because we're also delivering 100 hospital upgrades across the country and, crucially, over 100 new community diagnostic centres to speed up treatment for people, including, Mr Speaker, in the Deputy Leader's constituency, the Shadow Work and Pension Secretary's constituency, the Energy Secretary, the Justice Secretary, the Attorney General's constituency. That's how committed we are, Mr Speaker. But look, let me end on this, because he mentioned Hillingdon Hospital, he mentioned Uxbridge. I tell you what, I want to help the people of this country, Mr Speaker. I want to make sure that not only can they get to work, but they get the care they need. Why on earth does he want to charge them £12.50 every time they visit their GP and hospital?